You know what, man? Honestly, I'm not feeling this right now. No, I've got a need. I've got the need for speed. The Need for Speed is one of the longest running franchises in video games, with a 20-plus year history of games that range anywhere from serious simulation to Fast and Furious inspired nitrous oxide fueled Dubra racer. It's also one of the top 10 most successful video game series in terms of sales, with around 150 million copies sold. You know, in the vast sea of racing games that exist today, it's easy for NFS titles to get kind of lost in the crowd. But 20 years ago, Road and Track presents The Need for Speed stood out far above the rest. Developed by Pioneer Productions and EA Canada, long before EA became the world's most hated video game publisher, The Need for Speed originally launched in 1994 on the ancient and almost forgotten Panasonic 3DO console. I don't have this version, or a 3DO for that matter, so my review will be covering the DOS port of the game, which released exactly a year later on August 31st, 1995. This version is widely considered to be far superior, with higher resolutions, more tracks, but also revamped menus and a few other changes for the better. As arcadey and over-the-top as some of the games in the series have been, it's somewhat surprising to see that the first game is a little closer to a simulator than to something like a Burnout game. Right off the bat, you get the sense that the Need for Speed is serious about its licensed cars, and they're not all super exotic. Clicking on the cars brings up fully narrated showcases complete with pictures, historical information, and performance specs, but there's also music videos for each ride that can only be called car porn. You've got some cost more than your house entries like the Lamborghini Diablo and the Ferrari 512, but other cars that even mere mortals could theoretically purchase, like the Toyota Supra and Mazda RX-7, are treated with the same level of detail and respect. I gather that this stuff is what the Road and Track name really brought to the table, and it gives the game a level of polish that wasn't seen in racing games of its day. You can see how it would have appealed to car enthusiasts. That level of polish extends to the in-game visuals. In an era when racing games were transitioning from 2D sprites to 3D polygons, NFS paved the way with texture-mapped polygonal car models and impressive effects like skid mark decals and smoke from skidding tires, even gravel effects when you slip onto the shoulders. Car interiors are also detailed, if flat, images of real dashboards, complete with animated gear shifts and working rearview mirrors. The environments are equally nice looking and varied. There are 3 point-to-point courses, each with 3 segments: Alpine, Coastal, and a city course which looks at least a little bit like Vancouver, which makes sense since EA Canada is located near there. There are also 3 closed circuits: Rusty Springs, Vertigo Ridge, and the perpetually autumnal Autumn Valley Raceway. The circuits are nice, but the game really shines in the point-to-point tracks. The first segments all start out with gentle curves and plenty of straights, but they get increasingly windy and challenging in later segments. They're also pretty long courses that'll take you a good 10 minutes or more to complete, unless you're pretty good.
You've got a top 10 time and a top speed for this track.
Of course, the graphics are dated by today's standards, but surprisingly, the physics model isn't. In terms of car handling, no other game at the time felt quite as right, and I'd go as far to say that the physics in the first game feel more authentic than the next 3 or so sequels. The cars have a distinct weight to them, and they all have different handling characteristics. The tail of the rear-wheel drive Porsche 911 has a tendency to slide out. The all-wheel drive Lamborghini is quick off the line and powerful enough to spin tight donuts if you know how to do it. And now it's time for a Dome Candy Games pro tip. The spec sheet that you can look at in the galleries isn't just for show. You can actually fact-check these by taking any of the cars out in a time trial race on the Rusty Springs Raceway. Hit F8 a few times to display fifth wheel racing stats, which will measure your acceleration, braking, and quarter-mile performance. A testament to the driving model, I was generally able to match Road and Track's numbers. This has been a Dome Candy Games pro tip. While the driving model seems right on, maybe even more fun than driving is crashing. This really appeals to my inner 11-year-old. It's just like smashing a couple of Matchbox cars together and watching them fly across the room. In fact, back in the day, my friend and I would play NFS not to race, but to create the most rad crash possible. As an added bonus, if you crash and land right side up, you can just drive away unscathed. Crashes give you an interesting look into the quirks of the physics engine. I don't think a Lamborghini could do this in real life, but thanks to a rather boxy collision boundary, it's possible in the Need for Speed. And this is where the Need for Speed's fairly robust replay system comes in handy. You can watch things in slow motion, change the camera angle, and most importantly, save as many replays as you want. I actually have a handful of replays that I've saved from way back in the day of my best or most weird exploitations of the physics engine. For more of this goodness, check out my Need for Speed episode of Nostalgia Lobe, where I talk about some personal memories of the game. Speaking of crashes, the sound in Need for Speed was also brilliant. Crunching, squeaking metal sounded just right during a crash. Squealing tires and the real recordings of engine noises made the game stand out. I also can't help but mention the music. You've got metal anthems, classy gallery menu music, plus pretty varied music in the car demo videos, anything from jazz to rock. It screams mid-90s, and it is extreme with a capital X. Game modes are everything you'd expect. In head-to-head, you race against one other car, and you have to contend with traffic and cops on point-to-point courses. And hey, getting pulled over twice gets you a free vacation.
Congratulations. You've just won an all-expenses-paid county vacation.
Tournament is the closest thing to a career mode that the first NFS has. The trick is that there's only one difficulty, and it is tough. The AI is relentless, and it doesn't really make mistakes in this mode.
Bonus track? No one told me about this one. I think you're on your own.
Completing the tournament gets you access to the bonus track, Las Vegas, a super high-speed nighttime track, as well as a few cheat codes that are totally worth the effort. Entering EAC Rally before a race coats the track with gravel and makes racing against the AI virtually impossible. It also converts the Rusty Springs track to an Egyptian theme because, you know, mid-90s. EAC Power gets you the awesome 800 horsepower Warrior car, a fictional hypercar that is just supernaturally fast. It's got a 0 to 100 time of just over 6 seconds, and hitting 200 miles per hour with just a bit of straight track is commonplace. The thing is also super stable. It's tough to slide, it hugs corners really well, but it can get away from you if your midichlorians aren't quite Anakin Skywalker level. You'll hit jumps you didn't know existed and crash in ways you didn't know were possible. I'm sure there's a theoretical top speed to this thing, but up around 260 you tend to run out of track on the city course. In fact, it's so fast sometimes it just goes through other cars. The original Road and Track Presents The Need for Speed set a high bar for serious car enthusiast type racing games, and while it was obvious that it would get a sequel, I don't think anyone would have predicted a more than 20-year legacy. In fact, this year marks yet another entry in the series called, wait for it, The Need for Speed. God, I love modern video game naming conventions. Graphically, it looks awesome, but there's a lot of competition out there these days. So, is the original still worth a look? In my opinion, yeah. It might not look like much anymore, but it still plays pretty well, and crashing is always fun. It also runs pretty well on modern PCs using DOSBox, and it's not exactly rare or in high demand, so finding a loose copy on eBay isn't too tough right now. In 1996, a special edition of NFS was released that added some new features. Check out my Dome Candy Games SuppleMENTAL video for details about that version, plus some more information about a track editor that a programmer made in the years following the game's release. For some of my personal memories of the game, including my favorite insane crash replays and what the game looked like when I played it more than 20 years ago, check out my Need for Speed episode of Nostalgia Lobe. And if you're interested in some of the other iterations of the first game in the Need for Speed series, I would highly recommend checking out Lazy Game Review's two-part series on the game. He covers not only the original 3DO version released in 1994, but also the PlayStation 1 port as well as some weird Japanese imports. It's an older video, but it's really thorough and the information is great. As always, let me know if you have any personal memories of the Need for Speed, and specifically which one in the series is your favorite. And as always, thanks for watching Dome Candy Games, because video games are like candy for your dome.